Picture this. You're a divine being with infinite wisdom, command over the oceans, and a cool subterranean palace no one can find on Google Maps. You're Enki, god of water, magic, and casually violating cosmic protocol. And instead of minding your godly business, you decide to hand over the entire operating manual of the universe to a bunch of mud brick building humans who still think thunder is a dragon fight in the sky. Why? Because Enki isn't like the other gods. He's not into smiting or demanding goat sacrifices every 12 minutes. He's more like the cosmic hacker who figured out how reality runs and thought, yeah, let's open source this bad boy. The Sumerians believed Enki possessed the me, not me as in your narcissistic ex, but me as in divine codes that defined everything. Justice, love, music, architecture, war, power, karaoke probably. These weren't just ideas, they were cosmic software packages, like the iOS of existence, and only the gods were supposed to have access. And what does Enki do? He gives them to humans. Just hands them over. Like some mythological Robin Hood of forbidden knowledge, except instead of gold, he's distributing god-level data encryption keys. This is the moment where mythology slaps science fiction in the face. Because if you think about it, Enki basically violated the terms of service of the divine cloud storage. He didn't just break a rule, he broke the rule, never let mortals play with the source code. And this tiny act of cosmic treason, it may have been the thing that jump-started civilization. Oops. Imagine you're the CEO of Reality TM, and you've encrypted everything, from weather patterns to TikTok dances, into sacred objects called the me. Now picture one of your developers, Enki, leaking the entire source code to humanity. Oops. But here's the thing, humanity didn't crash like a buggy program. Instead, we thrived. We built massive ziggurats, created written language, and even figured out how to domesticate goats, who still look at us suspiciously, by the way. These me weren't just ordinary objects, they were semi-living, vibrating artifacts containing the universe's source code. Think divine USB drives, but way more cursed and glowy, and Enki just handed them out like party favors. The other gods were not happy about this, especially Inana, who later stole the me from Enki during a divine drinking session. Yes, you heard that right. The first recorded intellectual property theft happened during a godly hangover. But here's the real plot twist. Some scholars think this whole story is actually about humanity, graduating from because the gods said so to because we have a proper system now. We basically went from divine tech support to writing our own user manual. Imagine building a massive tiered mud brick tower in the middle of the desert. Not for shade, not for defense, not even for vibes, but because you're trying to get better reception from the divine cloud server. That's a ziggurat, specifically the Ziggurat of Enki, which ancient Sumerians treated like the world's first data center / prayer hub / cosmic hotline. You know, just in case you needed to call down some metaphysical IT support from the gods. But this wasn't just a tall building with spiritual aspirations, the structure was symbolic. The higher you climbed, the closer you got to the heavens, unless you were Enki, who lived underground because of course he did. The god of water literally dwelled in the watery depths, which is like having your divine office located in the plumbing system of reality. Here's the wild part. The ziggurat might have functioned like a transmission tower, a cosmic relay where humans received the me from the divine realm. Think of it as the original download site for enlightenment.exe. According to the mythology, it wasn't just about praying, it was about accessing information. You showed up to the ziggurat to get updates on how the universe worked, laws, rituals, maybe some early clay tablet memes. If temples were churches, ziggurats were knowledge hubs, distributing firmware updates for the human soul. And that might explain why ancient Sumer wasn't just digging irrigation ditches. They were writing legal codes, mapping stars, and inventing beer. Because when your god is beaming down knowledge through a sky brick antenna, suddenly figure out algebra becomes a group activity. And to think, we're over here bragging about Wi-Fi 6. Okay, let's talk about the actual tablets of destiny. Because somewhere between myth and archaeology, things get suspiciously spicy. Today we've dug up loads of ancient Sumerian clay tablets. Most of them are, let's be honest, super boring. Like, here are 47 goats paid in taxes to the temple, boring. But then, every once in a while, archaeologists stumble across tablets covered in strange symbols, geometric sequences, and cosmic gibberish that make your third eye twitch. These aren't shopping lists. They're weird, dense, ritualistic, sometimes borderline astrophysical. And here's the best part. Some of them are totally undeciphered. Modern scholars read them like your grandpa reads emojis, confused but trying really hard. Now, fringe theorists, those wonderful people who've watched Ancient Aliens way too many times, believe these might be remnants of ancient data storage devices. Like maybe not USBs exactly, but early attempts to encode knowledge in ways our little 21st century brains no longer comprehend. Is that true? Probably not. Is it cool to think about? Absolutely. Even without the tinfoil hats, there's a real argument that Eridu was the first organized knowledge center. The Ziggurat wasn't just a spiritual structure, it was a library, a think tank, a metaphysical Google Drive written in cuneiform. These people were logging rituals, myths, healing techniques, laws, and maybe even early attempts at philosophy, all before the pyramids had finished hiring their first interns. And all of it may have been sparked by one god who said, "You know what? Screw the rules. Let's teach the humans everything." So the next time you complain about reading an instruction manual, remember, 6,000 years ago, some Sumerian nerd may have been carving existential truths into clay because Enki broke cosmic NDA protocol. You know what's worse than leaking divine information to humanity? Getting robbed by your ex in the middle of a spiritual bender. Enter Inana, goddess of love, war, sex, vengeance, and probably the patron saint of impulsive decisions. One myth claims she got Enki totally sloshed and stole the me right out from under him. And he didn't even realize until the next morning. Classic. This wasn't just a prank, it was the first divine power heist. Inanna takes off with the sacred me, hops on her boat because ancient goddesses cruise in style, and books it back to her own temple in Uruk like she just looted the cosmic Apple store. Enki sobers up and suddenly realizes, oh no, she has the code for civilization. But instead of smiting or declaring war, he's like, hey, let her keep it. Why? Because apparently sharing the me wasn't just a mistake, it was the inevitable next step. Like when your secrets get leaked online and you realize, welp, I guess everyone knows I still listen to Avril Lavigne now. Inanna's theft is a big old metaphor. Not just for power struggles between cities Uruk versus Eridu, but for the moment knowledge stops being sacred and starts being distributed. It's when divine mystery becomes civic policy and temples become places where mortals make decisions without waiting for thunderbolts from the sky. Basically, Inanna stole enlightenment while Enki had the divine equivalent of a wine hangover. And civilization didn't just survive, it thrived. So yes, the birth of human progress might trace back to a drunken artifact handoff between two immortal beings. And somehow that's still more professional than half the startup meetings you've ever attended. Let's take a moment to appreciate the Sumerians, the overachieving ancients who invented cities, taxes, irrigation, law codes, beer, and passive-aggressive cuneiform complaints about lazy neighbors. But the real kicker, they didn't credit themselves for any of it. Nope. They said, yeah, we're only this advanced because a god literally dropped a knowledge bomb on us. And that god was Enki, the divine rebel, the mythological equivalent of Prometheus, but with more water references and fewer eagles pecking at his liver. By giving away the me, Enki basically played the role of a cosmic whistleblower. The divine world had a monopoly on reality's operating system, and Enki went full WikiLeaks with it. He cracked open the vault, handed humans the source code for everything, and somehow wasn't immediately smited into a puddle. Which raises a question. Was Enki a revolutionary or just bored? Either way, the consequences were enormous. What started as a small act of divine generosity ended up kickstarting every system that makes civilization civil. Legal structures, me. Music theory, me. Architecture. Yep, that's a me. The Sumerians didn't think up these systems, they received them. This wasn't a culture growing slowly and organically. It was a download event. And for that reason, some scholars treat Eridu as the true birthplace of systematized knowledge. Like the original Silicon Valley, but with more goats. And what's especially weird is how organized it all became. As if the information given wasn't chaotic or mythic, but precise, technical, structured. So was this the divine plan all along? Or did Enki just wing it? Either way, congrats humanity. Your entire civilization might be built on what amounts to cosmic intellectual theft and a really questionable night out. So what do you do after someone hands you the metaphysical blueprints for society? You build temples, you invent writing, and then, because apparently that wasn't enough, you invent school. Yeah, thanks Enki. Really appreciate that. According to some historians, the Ziggurat of Enki in Eridu might not have just been a temple. It could have been the world's first formal education center. That's right, humanity's original schoolhouse may have looked like a mud brick skyscraper built to whisper to the gods. Now don't imagine desks and blackboards. Picture apprentice scribes learning to carve wedge-shaped symbols into clay tablets for 6 hours a day, while their teacher loomed behind them like an angry librarian with a god complex. And what were they studying? The me, of course. Or at least watered-down versions of them. Legal formulas, ethical principles, hymns, rituals, and the proper way to annoy your enemies using a stylus and a passive-aggressive inscription. This was where society learned to remember, not through oral tradition, but through written abstraction. They weren't just writing stories, they were encoding reality. But here's the hilariously human part. We also have tablets that appear to be cheat sheets. Literal Sumerian students 5,000 years ago writing down answers before a big exam and probably sweating through their linen loincloths. So congratulations. Not only did Enki give us writing and knowledge, he also indirectly created homework stress and test anxiety. Yay, progress. In a very real sense, that Ziggurat was where humanity decided, let's not just live, let's understand. It was the original knowledge transmission tower, and it set the tone for every university, think tank, and angry group project that came after. Basically, thanks to Enki, you can trace your student loan debt back to one guy in Mesopotamia who couldn't keep a secret. Let's talk about the cosmic drama that comes with being the guy who broke heaven's firewall. Once Enki handed over the me, there was no going back. The divine monopoly on truth was shattered like a cheap clay pot. And suddenly, humanity wasn't waiting around for thunderbolts or cryptic dreams. We were building, calculating, planning, arguing, and writing legal documents that basically said, if you steal my ox again, I'm suing. But here's the kicker. The gods didn't revoke the access. They didn't scramble the divine password or roll out a firmware patch to shut us down. They just let it happen. Which raises the question, did the gods want us to evolve? Or were they just watching the chaos unfold like reality TV? Next on Keeping Up with the Sumerians, Inana crashes a party, steals the laws of existence, and Enki wakes up with a headache and an existential crisis. It's like divine customer support just gave up and said, let's see where this goes. And where it went was everywhere. Civilization exploded. Mesopotamia became a hotbed of innovation, bureaucracy, art, war, poetry, plumbing, and at least one poorly managed Ziggurat gift shop. But maybe the weirdest part? The further we advanced, the more we forgot where it came from. Over time, the me became myth, the gods faded into metaphor, and Enki got filed under ancient weird stuff next to mummies and cursed amulets. And yet, we're still obsessed with knowledge. Still building towers, still chasing secrets, still trying to figure out the rules of the game. Without realizing the game itself might have been handed to us 6,000 years ago in a mud brick tower by a god who thought, yeah, they'll probably be fine. Spoiler, we were not fine, but it was entertaining. Here's a thought experiment. What if humanity wasn't supposed to become what it is today? What if the divine blueprint Enki shared wasn't just a helpful guide, but a cosmic beta version of reality? An unstable developer build of existence that humans weren't qualified to run. Because let's be honest, giving mortals access to the me is like handing a toddler a nuclear launch code and saying, don't touch the red button unless it's really important. Think about it. We didn't just use the me for music and lore, we also used them for war, manipulation, weird rituals, and definitely some ill-advised architecture. We took the metaphysical starter pack and immediately tried to mod it with swords and tax systems. It's like giving humans access to Photoshop and watching them immediately make memes of their boss riding a camel. The power was there, but the taste, questionable. And maybe that was the point. Maybe Enki didn't break the rules at all. Maybe he rewrote them, gave us the option to evolve, crash test reality, and, if we were smart enough, refactor the code. Or maybe he just wanted someone else to talk to besides gods who yelled about thunder and sacrificed perfectly good bulls. Either way, that moment, the handing over of the me, was the software update that launched civilization. It had bugs, it caused some epic crashes, every empire ever. But it also made possible every scientific leap, every creative masterpiece, every baffling philosophical debate you've ever pretended to understand. So next time you marvel at human progress, or question why society feels like an unfinished group project, just remember, we're all running on divine beta software from a god who broke the rules. And honestly, that explains so much.